Welcome to Rewired Sober, the podcast that tells the truth about why women drink and what it actually takes to stop. Spoiler alert, it's not a character flaw. It's your conditioning and the roles you were handed long before you ever picked up a drink. I'm your host, Kate Vitella. I have been an RN for well over 2 decades. I'm addiction trained, a psychiatric nurse, and a sobriety coach. And this is where we do science and soul work of a woman's recovery. So you can stop white knuckling this shit and actually start trusting yourself. I am a raging feminist, a fashion lover, and I swear a lot. So if that's for you, buckle up, let's go. This episode is another solo episode, the neuroscience and why your brain stopped believing in you and how we can move toward repair on that. So I'm going to talk about something. I hear this weekly from clients. And they'll say, Kate, I don't trust myself anymore, or I don't trust that I can be around alcohol, or I don't trust that I'm going to stay abstinent of alcohol or drugs, stay on my diet. They've let themselves down several times. We all do this. We go through periods where we keep breaking promises to ourselves. And I hear people say, I don't know why I just can't do what I say I'm going to do. And if you've ever felt this way, I want to offer a little bit of a different perspective here, because I don't think self-trust is something you either have or you don't, right? I think self-trust is something your brain learns. And if your brain learned not to trust you, here's the whole thing. Neuroplasticity, it can learn to trust you again. And I had this thought a few weeks ago. I had filled out an application, and this thought sort of popped in my head last week or the week before. I have always wanted to do a TED Talk, and I've been doing this podcast now for like over a year, telling close friends and people around me that someday I'm going to do a TED Talk. I'm going to speak on big stages. And while I'm moving toward that in building out my media kit, I guess you would say, and evidence of my previous speaking engagements and clips and assets and various talks I've brainstormed. I've been building all that out. And I had asked to be on the wait list for a local TEDx organization for when they were going to be taking applications again. And I kind of ignored it. And suddenly I come upon this notification that you have 5 days left. The speaker application had been open. I didn't see it. And so quickly I put together the basis of a talk. And ironically, it's on self-trust. And that's kind of where I'm going with this is the talk that I proposed and that I started building, which I proposed to TEDx, was all about adversity, of course, my story, but how not only does it build resilience, and we've seen that TED Talk before, but it builds capacity and self-trust. And as I was answering all those application questions, I was thinking about something really interesting, which was, I have no idea if I'll ever get selected, right? By the time you listen to this episode, I probably got one of those letters in the mail that said, thank you for your time, a form letter. It doesn't matter. That's actually beside the point. The point is that I become someone who applies for a TED Talk. And years ago, I wouldn't even have submitted an application. I would have talked myself out of it because I would have gone through, am I qualified? Am I good enough? Are they going to pick 100 more people? Now, the hundreds, maybe thousands of people apply for these TED Talks, and they choose 5 a year. So the odds aren't in my favor. But I wouldn't even have applied. I would have waited until I felt more confident, more ready. I had a better idea. And this time I just brainstormed, I filmed, and I hit submit. And whether they choose me or not to do a TED Talk is out of my control. But submitting the application was completely within my control. I mean, I talk about this with my clients. What can you control? Other people's reactions? Hell no. What you can control is your own, the story that you tell yourself. And throughout this process, it was so interesting how I learned something about myself, because self-trust doesn't always come because you get accepted or life says, yes, you're the one. It's often built because you become someone who consistently shows up regardless of the outcome. It was like my brain had just collected another piece of evidence. She had an idea and she actually followed through. And it might sound small, but for me, this was huge because it's been something that I have been talking about for a long time. And suddenly it became more important to me that I was the type of woman to go for it than if I got chosen or not. That I was the type of woman that believes in herself enough to say, dear TEDx people, I'm good enough. Here's what I propose to talk about, right? It was like the whole concept around being that woman was more important to me suddenly than if I ever I would actually be kind of laughing if I got chosen because I'd be like, shit, now I have to actually do the thing, right? But in my own self-work through recovery and becoming a business owner, a podcaster, a person who has all these big ideas and then, decides to follow through, I've really had to look at how much do I trust my own self? Because you can spend your years and years and years collecting evidence and you can spend a lot of time proving yourself, especially when it comes to recovery. I have a coach myself. I go to a mindset coach and I was talking to her about all the things I've done to prove myself in the sober space. And she said, well, when are you going to start trusting yourself? Like, you've built this body of evidence and now it's about trust. And that really, really hit me. And so, yeah, I'm going to talk about that. And I also want to talk about a little of the neuroscience behind this, because of course I'm going to go down that rabbit hole and research this. When it comes to the brain, I've said this a million times. Your brain's like a prediction machine, right? It's constantly asking what is likely to happen next. And can I rely on this data, this person, this thing around me? Is this safe? Constantly asking. It's just like making all these predictions about the outside world. And it's also making predictions about you. Like when you tell yourself, I'm going to get up early every single day and go to the gym, or I'm not going to drink tonight, or I'm going to, write the book, or whatever it is, your brain starts paying attention. And then I guess for lack of a better explanation, your brain sort of watches what happens, not in a judgmental sense, but because it's a pattern making machine. It's sort of learning. And it creates this pattern recognition machine where it's like constantly collecting evidence and then updating the algorithm or updating the prediction. So it becomes more efficient, more efficient, more efficient. And so the question becomes, what evidence have you been giving your own brain? And I think this is really fascinating because something shifted in me the moment I hit submit to TEDx. And it was, I said I was going to do it. I followed through and I did it. And that will make me more likely to submit to another speaker panel, to update my website, to claim the title public speaker. And I say that like your brain isn't judging you. I mean, duh, right? It's not capable of that. But our brains are learning us all the time. And I think this changes things because I think a lot of times we assume that our inner voice is saying, you're lazy, you're weak, you don't have the willpower. And I don't think that's what the brain's doing. Like, imagine every Sunday evening you're gonna say no more drinking. I've had a rough time. I'm going back to work on Monday and I'm done. And you make it through the week, but then Friday comes and you drink again. Your brain's not like, oh my gosh, I'm the biggest judgy bitch and she's hopeless. It's actually like gathering that evidence, saying, based on this evidence I've collected, when you tell yourself, when she says she's gonna quit, That's usually not what happens. And it's a learning pattern from repetition. The same way we sort of learn any other task or skill, like we learn how to drive a car or something. It's like it learns what to expect from you. And in a way, that can be really comforting, right? Because if your brain learns a pattern, it can certainly learn another one. So I was thinking about this concept of neuroplasticity and how we build integrity and self-trust over time. And I think integrity is neuroplastic. And I want to explain what I mean by that. Not that, like, integrity isn't really part of your brain, but your ability to become someone whose actions match your values changes through neuroplasticity, right? And that's integrity. When you become someone whose action matches your values, you're developing integrity, or you're demonstrating integrity. And that changes through neuroplasticity. Because all neuroplasticity means is that our brains can change through repeated experience, right? Every repeated action strengthens something. Every repeated behavior teaches our brain. So building self-trust and integrity isn't in one moment. It's in tiny, ordinary Tuesday afternoons when no one's watching. It's built when you say, I'm going to apply as a speaker. I'm going to go for a walk. I'm going to read the book. And then you actually do it. And when you say, I'm not going to drink tonight, and you keep that promise to yourself, you write the email, you schedule the appointment, whatever it is that you're doing, these moments seem ordinary in the time, but it's like your brain collects all this evidence. I don't think our brain sees this as an ordinary moment. I think it's like, damn, okay, this is it. We're going to learn right from the jump here. If you've ever read any work from James Clear and his book, Atomic Habits, he'll say, every action you take is a vote for the type of person you want to become. And I guess that's kind of what was running through my head when I submitted the application for the TED Talk, is because, and I'll even add another layer to that. Every action is also evidence. It's evidence your brain uses to update its predictions about you. So submitting my TED Talk application didn't make me a speaker or a celebrity overnight, but it casts a vote. And it gave my brain another piece of evidence. Oh, when she has a good idea, when she really wants something, she follows through. Same with starting this podcast. I talked about it for a long time. I took a few little mastermind classes on how to do it. I asked a few people about editing software, and then I would put the idea away for a little bit. But when I really got down to it, it was like, nope, this is what I'm going to do. And I did it. And from there, it catapulted me into more confidence, more self-trust. It was like, when she says she's going to do something, she does it. A friend said that about me. A friend said the other day, we know when Kate has an idea and she puts it out there, she's actually going to do the thing. She's not one of those people that just bullshits for years and years and never takes action. And I found that to be a massive compliment. One action doesn't create an identity, but repeated actions do. And I think to this friend, I had repeatedly demonstrated to her, when I say things like, I'd really like to start a podcast, I'd really like to do a TED Talk, I do the thing. I follow through. And I've shown her that repeatedly. And, on the other hand, it's not like one broken promise with ourself or with someone else doesn't obliterate all of our self-trust, but repeatedly it can. And that's kind of the same with addiction. But there's good news here, right? Because the opposite is true. Repeated follow-through will rebuild our trust. So I'm just going on and on about all of this because it's such an important concept of the recovery journey, not only as you deserve to trust yourself. You're going to be gathering all this evidence and proving and learning and growing. You're going to get gold stars in checking the boxes of recovery. And at some point, you're going to have to take a deep breath and trust yourself. Trust your intuition, trust your gut, that you know the right thing to move forward. And maybe we stop making giant promises to ourselves, because that might be setting us up for failure. One thing I see all the time is people trying to rebuild their personal trust with these big, massive declarations. I'm going to change my whole life. I'm never going to drink again. I'm going to exercise every single day. And all that's really overwhelming. But what if instead you made promises your brain has the chance to watch you keep? I'm not going to drink tonight. Or I will go for a walk for 10 minutes. I'm going to drink water before dinner. You get what I'm saying? Something very small. And they're not exciting promises, but there's something that we be doing consistently. Our brain doesn't measure the size of the promise. It's measuring whether our actions matched our words. And I think that's why I took that as such a compliment, because the things I've been blathering on about, I actually do. My actions and words matched, because I've had a lot of struggle with this. And I'll also say time in recovery has also made me more confident and trusting myself naturally. But I think we confuse confidence and self-trust. Confidence is believing that you can do something. I mean, I believe one day I can actually be a really great speaker. But self-trust is sort of like believing you're going to show up for yourself. Confidence says, I think I can do it. I'm a good enough human. Self-trust says, I've watched myself do it enough times that I believe I will. And I sometimes confidence comes more from encouragement, I think. And for me personally, the self-trust I've built has come from evidence. And that is why taking action matters so much. The behavior over time is the evidence, but my brain has come to believe behavior far more than it believes intention. So I guess to make something clear here, let this be the point of this episode. You're not going to rebuild your self-trust with one grand gesture, but you're going to rebuild it with hundreds of tiny, ordinary moments. Like James Clear said, every action is a vote for the person you want to become. And I'll add this, every action's also evidence your brain uses to decide whether it can trust you. So don't underestimate the small decisions that you made today, right now, making the phone call, going for the walk, keeping the appointment, like keeping your promise to yourself, submitting the application. Maybe I never give the TED Talk. I hope I do. But even if I don't, like I said, I have become someone different. I've become someone who follows through and who raises her hand, who submits the application. And overall, that's what my recovery has been. It's not perfect. I am not fearless and dripping with confidence, but I have become someone my own brain can rely on. Eventually, our brain reaches the new conclusion of, yeah, I can count on her. She's got my back. And that's what it feels like to trust yourself. So shout out to self-trust as one of the greatest outcomes of recovery and probably one of the least talked about. So much of the recovery talk is about, quote, not drinking. And it is, but not drinking is just the doorway. And self-trust is what you build brick by brick by brick as you go and you keep walking through this whole process. And so many people, when we first stopped drinking, oh God, we've broken lots of promises to people. I mean, if I just look at myself, I used to hide my drinking. I hide my empty bottles. I would white lie and then full on lie to people, but then not only did I lie to other people, I abandoned myself to keep everyone else comfortable. And I never trusted my own emotions or my own decisions. And I certainly didn't trust that I could handle life without escaping it. That was something I had never practiced and experienced, but two, I had never given myself the evidence that I was capable of that. And so not only did I have to rebuild trust with other people by showing up over and over and over again, but I had to rebuild it with myself. And I remember, honestly, when I went back to work as a nurse after getting in trouble and being put in the monitoring program, one of the biggest strong points that I could argue as to why I deserved the job was that I promise I'll show up. I may not know the most about mental health. I haven't worked in a while. I've gone through some shit. But one thing is true. I will be here every single morning at 7 a.m. because that is what I'm committed to doing. And whereas before, when I was working as a nurse, I was on time. I showed up to work. I wasn't one of those people that called out sick all the time, but it wasn't a huge deal to me. And in early recovery, one of the things that I promised to myself was, you will be at work every single day without calling out, on time. You're going to show up for yourself and you're going to show up for the organization. You're going to rebuild that trust within yourself, and then you're going to rebuild that trust as an employee. Because I had shot that all to hell. And what I noticed over time is that it became a feeling within me. Tiny bits of evidence I earned. Small decisions. Every time I did something I said I was going to do. When I talk about the brain kind of slowly collecting data. And then over time, I realized bigger things, like I can survive uncomfortable emotions because I watched myself do it. Not perfect, messy, sometimes screaming into a pillow. That was my coping skills. It wasn't this Pinterest level, you're going to go journal. No, sometimes it was full on like, fuck this, scream into a pillow, eat a pint of ice cream, and call my mom and cry. But I still did it. And then I continued building trust. Like, it's okay. I can change my mind. I can ask for help. I can walk away from situations that don't fit me anymore. Even to the point of, you talk about not being perfect. I wasn't sure I could even make a mistake in early sobriety without reverting all the way back to the woman that I was before getting sober. But as I built my own self-trust, I realized, yes, I can make a mistake and not blow up my whole life. You're giving your brain new evidence. And you notice none of this stuff I just listed has to do with alcohol. It has to do more so with becoming the person that you believe. Because I don't think failure destroys your self-trust. It's self-abandonment. Every time you ignore your intuition, you say yes when you mean no, you stay quiet when something feels wrong, you keep making exceptions to your own values, you start to teach yourself that, your own inner voice, your own self isn't reliable. So, questions I'd like to ask my clients is, in what areas of your life do you trust yourself more today than you did a year ago? Not like, where are you perfect? But where have you gathered the evidence? Even, it has nothing to do with alcohol. Maybe it's leaving a toxic relationship, or maybe it's staying and keeping a commitment, setting a boundary. Maybe it's trusting that your decisions count instead of polling the audience all the time. Those moments really matter. And another point of discussion question I like to ask clients is, what's one promise you can make yourself this week that's small enough that you can keep it? Not a huge life overhaul, but just something simple. Can you go for a walk? Can you go to bed on time, like early? I try to make a point to go to bed at a certain time, and that's a promise I keep myself because sleep's important, right? It's not grand gestures. It's just tiny promises. So I'm going to close it out. One of my favorite definitions of confidence is, it's basically self-trust in motion. And the people around me that I admire the most aren't fearless or perfect. They've simply collected enough evidence that they're going to keep showing up for themselves even when life gets messy. And that's the beauty of all of this that recovery gives us. So I hope this Babble Nation with no notes and just riffing was helpful. I'm sure I was all over the place, but I trusted myself that I could do it. Okay, that's enough of that. All right, that's what I got for you today. If this hits, send it to a woman who needs to hear this shit, because we are not doing this alone. You can find me on Instagram and pretty much all the socials at Rewired Sober. The links are in my show notes if you want to work with me one-on-one and go deeper. I love you, mean it, take care of yourself, and I'll catch you on the next one.